Kim Geon-woo. Kim Geon-woo is a rookie boxer whose first reflex is to protect, even when the safer move is to keep your head down. Portrayed by Woo-jin, he's introduced during Seoul's COVID-era recession as a disciplined former Marine who turned structure into survival, training hard, working multiple jobs, and treating strangers with quiet courtesy. That decency becomes both strength and vulnerability when his mother is lured into a predatory loan contract and collectors turn violent at her cafe. Geon-woo answers with his body, fighting barehanded and earning a facial scar that reframes his boxing dream as a survival problem. Geon-woo's relationships show how his ideals survive escalation. With his mother, he is dutiful to the point of self-erasure, pausing his own ambitions to repair a crisis shaped by economic collapse and fine print. With Woo-jin, rivalry flips into brotherhood. Their bond becomes the story's emotional grammar for trust earned through pain, not speeches. With President Choi, Geon-woo encounters a different model of power, money used as protection rather than leverage. Choi's decision to hire him as a bodyguard turns Geon-woo into a different kind of fighter, less athlete and more shield. Across season 1, Geon-woo drives the major escalations. He enters the operation against Smile Capital, repeatedly refuses to ignore non-essential strangers, survives the mid-season collapse of the adult protectors, and returns after months of training to finish the fight. Thematically, he embodies the series' claim that hope is not naive, it is disciplined. His refusal to become a truly predatory bloodhound, someone who hunts the vulnerable for profit, forces allies to recalibrate their own limits and keeps the story tethered to justice rather than revenge. Woo-jin. Woo-jin enters as Geon-woo's opposite. Louder, cockier, and sharply alert to how money and reputation steer people. Played by leesangyi, Woo-jin carries a particular pressure, living in the shadow of an Olympic medalist father, and that insecurity leaks out as swagger in the ring. Early on, he frames boxing less as virtue than as survival. Win, get paid, stay relevant. Yet the season's most persuasive turn is that Woo-jin's pragmatism does not cancel loyalty, it equips it. He learns contracts, reads threats, and understands which arguments work on which kinds of men. Woo-jin shows what he contributes that Geon-woo cannot. With Geon-woo, he becomes a translator between moral ideals and street reality, sometimes soothing conflict, sometimes provoking it, but consistently refusing to let their partnership become sentimental or complacent. With Hyun-joo, he clashes because she privileges procedure and strategy over immediate rescue. His willingness to apologize tactically, even when he feels morally correct, reveals a socially intelligence he rarely admits. With President Choi, Woo-jin is the one who can respect authority while still negotiating it, an ability that becomes vital once the rules of confrontation broaden beyond fists. Woo-jin is central to the formation arc. He chooses friendship after defeat, pushes Geon-woo to understand the scam's mechanics, throws himself into the bodyguard role with a mix of humor and ferocity. His stabbing and recovery reset the tone from caper-like teamwork to grief-driven resolve. His survival also prevents the story from collapsing into a lone wolf revenge tale. Woo-jin represents earned belief, a man who starts skeptical that goodness pays and ends by choosing it anyway because it is the only way their brotherhood can mean something. Choi Tae-ho. President Choi Tae-ho occupies an unusual dramatic space, a former legend of private lending who re-emerges as a 0% interest moneylender, running what looks like a shabby bookshop while quietly moving enormous cash. Portrayed by Joon-ho, he is wheelchair-bound after a violent history with Kim Myeong-gil, making him both a strategist and a confessor, someone who understands predation because he once lived inside its ecosystem. His defining trait is controlled severity. He is compassionate towards borrowers, ruthless about risk management, and blunt about what predatory systems do to families. Choi reveals his function as a bridge between generations. To Geon-woo and Woo-jin, he is patron and test. He offers money that can solve immediate pain but frames it as a contract of responsibility rather than charity. To Hyun-joo, his foster granddaughter and intended successor, he provides protection and limits, fearing her investigation will get her killed. The season even links her vulnerability to a family tragedy in her past. To Yang-jung and Do-young, the veteran knifers in his orbit, he is a leader and burden, carrying guilt for not ending Myeong-gil's rise earlier. Season 1's architecture depends on Choi. He recruits the young boxers, bankrolls operations against Smile Capital, and teaches a philosophy of organizational collapse. Undermine a criminal group's internal trust, and it will fracture. His death is deliberately catalytic. By removing the adult solution, the series forces its young heroes to confront what justice looks like without a patron. And it tests whether Choi's ethic, which is to help the vulnerable, fight the exploiters, and not to become like them. Kim Myeong-gil. Smile Capital's CEO Kim Myeong-gil is less a flamboyant villain than a disciplined system builder. Played by Park Sung-woong, he excels at translating desperation into enforceable contracts, then using violence to make the paperwork real. He speaks the language of rescue, lifelines during recession, while designing loans that cannot be repaid. That duplicity matters because it doesn't position him as a street thug, but as a financier of brutality, comfortably straddling boardrooms and back alleys. Personality-wise, Myeong-gil projects calm control and almost managerial patience. Even when humiliated by people with status, he pivots quickly into retaliation, preferring leverage like blackmail videos, reputational threats, and bought officials over tantrums. He also cultivates a clear division of labor. He handles vision and intimidation, while enforcers like In-bom make compliance physical. His central motivation is explicit. He wants a casino, a symbol of wealth and legitimacy, and he treats people as stepping stones towards that goal. What remains comparatively unspecified is a deeper ideology or wound. The season suggests history with President Choi but does not linger in explanation. Myeong-gil supplies the pressure points that turn a friendship drama into a war story. He scars Geon-woo, expands his reach through corruption, and targets Choi's circle with surgical cruelty when they near his secrets. In the final stretch, he escalates to kidnappings and information warfare, revealing comfort with both physical and digital coercion. Thematically, Myeong-gil embodies the show's thesis about predatory capitalism. Exploitation is rarely spontaneous, it is organized, often legality adjacent, and enforced by people who can smile while breaking lives. Kim Hyun-joo. Hyun-joo is introduced as President Choi's foster granddaughter and the operational mind pushing his benevolent lender, cover into active resistance. Portrayed by the late Kim Se-ron, she contrasts Geon-woo's visible immediate heroism with systems thinking. Her early investigation tracks a scam ring targeting the unhoused by stealing identity documents for loans. That mission positions her as the season's sharpest social conscious character. Hard-edged, but not because she lacks empathy, but because she has earned that empathy without tactics that gets people killed. Her temperament is brisk and unsparing. She chastises the boxers for interfering with surveillance, yet selects them precisely because their physicality can do what her planning cannot. The defining relationship is with President Choi, which is mentor and ward, affection and friction. Choi worries she is digging too deep. She pushes back when she believes quiet charity is insufficient against organized exploitation. With Woo-jin, she spars tactically. With Geon-woo, she is drawn to his unpromising instinct to rescue, even when it ruins the plans. Hyun-joo highlights the tension between doing good and doing it safely, pushing others to ask whether justice can remain strategic without becoming cold. Yoon So-yeon, Geon-woo's mother, who is the emotional anchor of the story, representing everyday people crushed by economic pressure. A small business owner as she struggles with the pandemic losses, rent, and mounting debt, which makes her vulnerable to Smile Capital's predatory loans. Her choice to sign isn't portrayed as careless but as the result of desperation. She's warm but deeply anxious, carrying guilt over how her situation affects her son. Geon-woo's loyalty to her drives much of his risk-taking, while her kindness extends to Woo-jin, reinforcing the show's found family theme. Her depth sparks the central conflict, with threats against her pulling Geon-woo into a dangerous world. As she's moved into a safer environment, the cost of survival becomes clear, safety at the expense of normal life. Through Soo-yeon, the series makes its themes personal. Debt isn't abstract, it's lived, felt, and fought for through family. Hong Min-bum. Hong Min-bum serves as the season's elite hinge, showing that wealth offers no protection when reputation becomes leverage. A privileged heir with hotel ambitions, he turns to Kim Myeong-gil for funding after pandemic losses, assuming his status will shield him. Instead, he learns that loan sharks can weaponize shame more effectively than debt. He projects confidence but is driven by fear, arrogant enough to threaten, yet pragmatic when survival is at stake. His connection to his cousin, Inspector Min Kang-yong, becomes a liability as blackmail tightens control. Initially an outsider, Min-bum gradually aligns with Geon-woo and Woo-jin, offering access to institutional power they lack. Narratively, he functions as leverage. His conflict with Myeong-gil escalates tensions while his resources, money, mobility, and credibility enable the final takedown. He leans towards redemption, though his moral shift feels incomplete. Hwang Yang-jung. Hwang Yang-jung embodies the old guard in President Choi's circle, a veteran fixer whose calm hides readiness for decisive violence. Played by Lee Ha-young, he is framed in cast descriptions as Choi's right-hand man, running a Japanese restaurant, an outward normalcy that masks the fact that he can shift from conversation to knife work without theatrical buildup. Yang Jung is not a hero in innocent sense. He is a professional who has learned that predatory organizations rarely stop because someone asks politely. Plot-wise, Yang Jung is a turning point machine. He prevents Soo-yeon's kidnapping, supplies intelligence about Smile Capital's reach, executes the plan to capture Jang-do, and trains the young fighters in survival tactics once knives and guns enter the arena. His death, though, is swift and brutal, which is the moment the series removes Choi's adult protection layer, pivoting the story from taking down a scam ring into a grief-soaked campaign fueled by legacy and rage. Lee Do-young. Lee Do-young is one of season 1's most tragic figures because he is introduced with two incompatible lives: ruthless competence on the street and a tender domestic future at home. Played by Ryu Soo-young, he belongs to President Choi's knifer duo, able to stalk targets, interrogate informants, and strike first without hesitation. Yet the season repeatedly returns to the image of his pregnant wife, insisting that every act of resistance risks collateral damage and that family is both motivation and vulnerability. Season 1 uses Do-young to raise stakes mechanically. He participates in surveillance and extraction work to force the organization to move and help capture Jang-do to locate incriminating material. His murder alongside his wife demonstrates Myeong-gil's willingness to annihilate households, not just combatants. That brutality reframes the protagonist's mission from stop a lone shark to stop a man who will erase anyone's future to protect his own. Kang In-bom. Kang In-bom, often called Bom, is the season's primary physical antagonist, the battering ram that makes Smile Capital's contracts enforceable. Portrayed by Tae Won-suk, he is described in cast materials as an underling for Myeong-gil, who he met in prison, but his personal history is otherwise largely unspecified. The story uses him less as a psychological shaped individual than as the embodiment of violent labor. When Myeong-gil needs a message delivered, In-bom is the message. Narratively, he matters at 3 points. First, early violence. He helps crush Geon-woo during the initial collection assault, proving raw boxing talent isn't enough against organized brutality. Second, escalation, the 2 against 1 fight that is highlighted in the Netflix behind the scenes coverage as representative of the show's combat construction, making teamwork a survival skill and not a sentiment. Third, endgame. He remains an obstacle and information holder as the heroes pursue hostages and hidden leverage. Oh In-mok. Oh In-mok is the quietest logistical spine of President Choi's operation. He is introduced as a driver and a fixer inside Choi's seemingly mundane workplace. Easy to underestimate until the story reveals how much he holds together: transport, access, safe houses, and the fragile continuity of Choi's interest-free mission. His competence isn't flashy, it's the competence of someone who has survived by being careful. Mr. O is the hinge between defeat and comeback. He preserves remaining funds, relays the reality that allies have scattered, and after being persuaded that inaction enables further harm, helps the protagonist return with resources for a final attempt against Smile Capital. In the finale, his kidnapping becomes the trigger that converts stealth strategy into a rescue mission, forcing direct confrontation.